The night I realized my life was collapsing wasn't filled with fireworks of tragedy or a headline-worthy disaster. It was the quiet kind of collapse, the kind that sneaks up on you over years until one night you sit in a dimly lit apartment, surrounded by silence, and it hits you that no one is coming to check if you're still breathing. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room, stubbornly holding on while I felt myself breaking apart. The paint on the walls was peeling, the carpet was stained with years of cheap living, and the stack of overdue bills on the table seemed taller than me. I was 31 years old, and for the first time, I admitted it to myself, I was failing at life. That morning, I'd been called into my boss's office. His words were rehearsed, polite, sterilized of humanity. "Restructuring," he said. "Nothing personal." He slid the severance papers across the desk as if handing me a death sentence. I carried my belongings in a cardboard box past my coworkers, who suddenly found their screens very interesting. Outside, the city didn't pause for me. Cars honked, people rushed, life moved forward without noticing the man who had just been erased. I drove home in silence, parked outside my rundown apartment complex, and sat behind the wheel until the sun dipped below the skyline. I thought about calling someone, my sister, an old friend, but I couldn't bear the sound of my own failure spoken out loud. By the time I dragged myself inside, the weight of it was crushing. My rent was already late, my savings almost gone. There was no safety net, no backup plan. I was a man drowning in plain sight. Loneliness has a strange sound. It isn't silence, it's the faint echo of other lives unfolding around you. Through the walls, I could hear my neighbors laughing, the footsteps of couples upstairs, the muffled bass of someone throwing a party. The world was alive, but I was a ghost haunting my own existence. That night, lying under thin blankets in the cold, I thought about my father. He had left when I was 12. One morning he was just gone. No note, no explanation, just an absence that hollowed out our small family. I hated him for years. But as I stared at the cracks in my ceiling, the unpaid bills mocking me from the table, I understood why a man might run. Failure is heavy. Shame is heavier. But then my mind shifted to my mother. She never ran. She worked nights scrubbing offices and mornings serving coffee, her hands blistered and raw. I remembered her standing at the stove, hair tied back, telling me, "Hard work pays off, baby. Just keep pushing." My sister and I had lived on cereal and second-hand clothes, but she never let us feel unloved. If she hadn't quit on us, how could I quit on myself? Still, the days after losing my job were a blur of hopelessness. Depression has a way of stretching time, hours crawled by while weeks disappeared. I slept too much, ate too little, stared at my phone waiting for opportunities that never came. Each rejection email felt like proof that I was destined to fail. Then came the breaking point. It was late January, and the heater had stopped working. I sat in 3 layers of clothes, shivering under blankets, staring at a final notice from my landlord. For the first time in my life, I whispered the question aloud, what if I can't do this anymore? But something inside me rebelled. It wasn't dramatic, just a flicker of stubbornness, but it was enough. I thought of my mother again, of her resilience. I thought of my sister, who had carved out a life across the country, chasing opportunities one once believed were impossible. And I thought of the boy I used to be, the boy who swore he'd make something of himself. That boy didn't deserve to die in the ashes of excuses. So I made a decision. Not a grand, world-shattering one. A small one. I decided that tomorrow, no matter what, I would get up at sunrise and run. The next morning, I laced up my battered sneakers and stepped into the freezing air. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I pushed through block after block until sweat froze on my skin. I wasn't fast. I wasn't graceful. But I was moving forward. That run didn't change my circumstances, but it changed me. It reminded me that pain could be endured, that I wasn't as powerless as I felt. That single act became the first domino. I began structuring my days. Wake up early. Run. Shower. Read. Apply for jobs. Hustle. I cut out the numbing escapes, the endless scrolling, the late-night TV binges. I went to the library, checked out books on finance, psychology, discipline. At first, the concepts seemed like they belonged to another species, but little by little, they stitched themselves into me. One lesson burned itself into my brain: success isn't luck. It's consistency. I started picking up odd jobs. Food delivery. Fixing computers. Carrying boxes. Some days I made barely enough for groceries, but every dollar felt like defiance against the version of me who almost gave up. But progress was messy. One landlord nearly evicted me when I fell short on rent. A so-called friend borrowed money he never repaid. I got scammed on a freelance gig and went hungry for 2 days to cover gas. Nights were still hard, loneliness crept in, whispering that I was fooling myself. But each morning, I laced up those sneakers and reminded myself, forward. Always forward. It was during one of those odd jobs that I met Marcus. He owned a small logistics company and needed help moving inventory. I showed up on time, worked harder than anyone else, and didn't complain when the job stretched past midnight. A week later, he called me back. A month later, he offered me steady work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a lifeline. At the company, I made myself indispensable. I was the guy who said yes when others shrugged. Late shifts. Yes. Complicated spreadsheets no one wanted to touch. Yes. Learning new software on my own time. Yes. I wasn't the smartest, but I was relentless. Slowly, people noticed. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. That's where I met Elena. She worked in accounting, 2 floors up. At first, she was just a kind smile by the coffee machine, a nod in the hallway. But one afternoon, we both stayed late. The office was quiet, the city lights painting the windows, and somehow a small conversation about work stretched into 2 hours of laughter and stories. She had this calm presence, this way of listening that made you feel less alone in your skin. We started meeting more often. Coffee breaks turned into lunches, lunches turned into dinners. But I was terrified. I carried the weight of my failures, afraid she'd see me for the man I used to be. One night, I confessed it all: the jobs I'd lost, the nights I'd gone hungry, the times I almost gave up. I expected her to pull away. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Maybe those aren't failures. Maybe those are the battles that made you strong enough to be sitting here now." Her words cracked something open in me. For the first time, I believed that maybe I wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I had survived. Years passed. Marcus's company grew, and I grew with it. From grunt work to management, from paycheck to savings, from scraping by to standing tall. I made mistakes, sure. I botched a big order once that nearly cost us a client, but instead of firing me, Marcus pushed me to fix it. I stayed up 3 nights in a row, called every contact, recalculated every shipment, and somehow turned disaster into loyalty. That became a turning point, not just in my career, but in how I saw myself. I wasn't just surviving. I was leading. Elena and I built something too. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale. We fought sometimes, about my long hours, about her worries that I'd burn out. But we learned to communicate, to choose each other even when it was hard. One summer evening, standing on a bridge overlooking the city, I asked her to marry me. My hands shook, not from fear she'd say no, but from the disbelief that I had arrived at a place in life where love like this was possible. She said yes, tears in her eyes, and in that moment I realized every painful step had led me here. My sister flew in for the wedding. She hugged me and whispered, "I knew you'd get here." My mother, older now but still resilient, sat in the front row, pride shining brighter than any jewel. For the first time, I felt I had fulfilled the promise I made as a boy, to give them a better life. Now, years later, I sit in an office of my own, overlooking the skyline of the same city that once chewed me up and spit me out. I think back to that night in the cold apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the suffocating silence. If I could speak to that broken man, I'd tell him, hold on. You're not done. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. And maybe that's what I'm really telling you. If you're reading this and seeing yourself in my story, then listen closely, you are not finished. It doesn't matter how many times you've been knocked down, how many bills pile up, how many voices tell you you're not enough. None of that defines you. What defines you are the choices you make now. Don't wait for the world to hand you permission. Don't wait for luck to knock on your door. Success is built, one small, stubborn act at a time. Wake up early. Run when it hurts. Learn when it's easier to scroll. Say yes when others quit. Keep moving forward, even when every part of you screams to stop. Because one day, you'll look back from a place you never thought you'd reach. You'll stand in the light of your own resilience, and you'll understand that the struggle wasn't your ending. It was your becoming. So take the first step. Then take the next. Don't stop. You are not stuck. You are not finished. You are only in the middle of your story. And only you can decide how it ends.